Hilche Shluchin V'Shutfin Perek Shvi. Now we learned in Perek Vav that there's a chilik, there's a musik called Shutfim, and there's a musik called a Mesasik, a Balamois and a Mesasik. Shutfim means when two people work together, either they both invested the money together, or even if one of them invested the money and the other one didn't invest any money, but they're both working together in the Mois HaShutfis, or the items of Shutfis, so then they're Shutfim. The Pashtus Hadvarim is that they split the profits 50-50, and if there's losses, it's also 50%, 50%. And if they make a deal, whatever deal they make, that's a good deal. That's the musik called Shutfim. Then there's another musik called a Bal HaMois and a Mesasik, where someone invests money. He's not working. He invests the money, and he gives it to someone to manage that money and to do business with the money. So that person that invested the money is called the Bal HaMois, and that person that's doing the business is called the Mesasik. Now, when such a thing happens, so Chazal instituted that if there was no deal set between them, so half of the money, we look at half of the money as being a milva and half of the money being a pikadon. Whereas half of the money was lent to the Mesasik, and half of the money is still the Bal HaMois's money. It's still a pikadon of the money. And therefore, as a result of that, the Pashtus Advarim would be that since half of the money is the Bal HaMois's and half of the money is the Mesasik's, so half of the profit belongs to the Bal HaMois and half of the profit belongs to the Mesasik. And al derazeh, the loss, also the Pashtus should be that half, if there's a loss, half of it is the Bal HaMois and half of it is the Mesasik. The problem is, since Lepel, the Mesasik is the only one that's doing business, he's the only one that's working, so he's going ahead and he's working with the money that the Bal HaMois gave him. So now, that money that he gave him, let's say he gave him $1,000. So 500 of that is alva, and 500 of that is a pikadon. Now he's working with both monies. Now why is he working with the pikadon money? He's working with the pikadon money because he got halva. So Lepel, if he's going to generate profit from this $1,000, he's going to, let's say, have from the $1,000, he'll make another $1,000. Now $500 will be his because that money came from the halva money, and $500 will be the Bal HaMois because that came from the pikadon money. So he's going to go and give the Bal HaMois $500 that he got from the pikadon money. Now the question is, why did he work with the Bal HaMois's money and give him $500? The Pashtus, because he got a loan of $500 as well, and Mamela he was able to work with the other $500 and gain money for himself. So because he got the loan, therefore he went ahead and worked for the Bal HaMois's 50%. So it comes out that it's avak ribus. That's called avak ribus. It's not ribus mamish because it's not for sure that he's going to make a profit, and it's not ktsutza. But I'll quote upon him. It's called avak ribus. So therefore, if the deal is going to be, those be'emes, it's chotzi milvin chotzi pikadon. But if the deal is going to be that he's going to get Sai in the profit is going to get 50%, and Sai in the loss is going to get 50%, and that's all. So then it's going to come out that it's going to be avak ribus. So therefore, Chazal instituted that can't happen. So Memela, there's two eitzes. There's one eitzah is that you should pay the Mesasik. No, somehow or another, and the Ram discusses how much you pay the Mesasik. Whereas if you pay the Mesasik for his Isaskus, so you can make the deal that it'll be 50% profit, 50% loss for both sides. And Lepel, the Mesasik, is being paid, is being compensated for the fact that he's working with the Bal HaPikadon 50%. That's not a problem. But if there wasn't such a deal, made, so then Chazal instituted that the deal is going to be that Lepel, the Mesasik, will gain a third of the Bal HaPikadon's schar. So in other words, he'll gain a third of the Bal HaPikadon's schar, and if there's a loss, the Bal HaPikadon, which means the Bal HaMois, which he has a pikadon over there, he will have to take over a third of the loss that the the Mesasik had. So Mela, it comes out again. Let's say if they gained $1,000, so instead of splitting it 50-50, they're going to split it 2/3 and 2/3, 2/3 and a third. The Mesasik will get 2/3 of that $1,000, $666 and 2/3, and the Bal HaMois will only get 1/3, which is that $333 and 1/3. That's if they gain, and if they lose, the they lose. So again, the loss will be that 2/3 of the loss will be to the Bal HaMois, and 1/3 of the loss is going to be to the Mesasik. That's what we learned. So that's the Pashtus Advarim that we learned in Perek Vov. Now here in this Perek, the Rambam is saying that this din, that the Bal HaMois is mishtatif with the Mesasik in the loss that really the Mesasik should have had, whereas the Mesasik really should have been mishtatif in the loss of 50%. But Lepel, because the Mesasik was Mesasik in the Mois of the Pikodin, so to compensate him for what he did for the Pikodin, so therefore the Bal HaMois is being mishtatif in this loss, and 1/3 of that loss that the Mesasik should have had is going to the Bal HaMois. So it comes out ultimately that the 2/3 of the general loss is for the Bal HaMois, and only 1/3 of the loss is to the Mesasik. That's what we learned in Perek Vov. So here the Rambam is saying, if the Mesasik is going to end up paying back the Bal HaMois, the Mois HaMilva, that's l'cheleresh, the Mois HaMilva has to be paid back. So if, as a result of the fact that the Bal HaMois is going to be mishtatif with the Mesasik and his loss, it's going to cause that the Bal HaMois is going to be getting less than half of the original money he invested, which means that milva was never paid up. So, but that's not talking. That's not that. And then for sure he'll have to pay half of the money. The Rambam Taitra is clear. In other words, there's two dinim over here. There's one din is that it's chatzi milva chatzi pikadon. That when a person's an asik, when a person gives money, and he's the Bal HaMois, and then there's a mesasik, so that money is a chatzi milva chatzi pikadon. And since that money is a chatzi milva chatzi pikadon, just like every milva has to be paid up, so this milva also has to be paid up. There's no new din as far as the din that the milva has to be paid up. So that's l'chelerish, says the Rambam. Now there's another din that since it's a chatzi milva chatzi pikadon, so then we have to look at the losses and on the gains, and the question is who gets the loss and who gets the gain. So be'etzem me'ikra the din, it should be 50-50 as far as the loss and the gain is concerned. And on that, the din is because Lepel, he is a Mesasik, so he's being compensated. And Lepel, he's being, so the Bal HaMois is being mishtatif with the Mesasik in the loss, in what really should have been the Mesasik's loss. But that's only Bamedvar Mamurim if the Mesasik is going to pay back his halva. But if through the fact that the Bal HaMois is becoming a shutif, so to speak, being mishtatif in the loss of the Mesasik, and through that he's going to be getting less of half of the money that he gave him, which means he's not even getting his halva back. That's not the din that we're learning in Perek Vav. That's what I'm saying here in Perek Zayin. Let's learn inside. Perek Shvi. Hanesin mois lechaveri stam le'esasik ben. A person gave, the Bal HaMois gave to the Mesasik money, and they didn't make up any tonight. He gave him money le'esasik ben. What is the din? The din is, we learned before, that since there was no Tanai, so the din is that if there was a gain, so then 2/3 of the gain goes to the Mesasik, and 1/3 goes to the Bal HaMois. And if there was a loss, 2/3 of the loss goes to the Bal HaMois, and 1/3 of the loss goes to the Mesasik. Well, they made such a t'nai. Memela, since that night is not really a t'nai that could work, so again, so the din is again that 1/3 goes to the Mesasik. In other words, either the 1/3 of the schar goes to the Mesasik, or lepel, 1/3 of the hefsid is taken off the Mesasik. And Memela, so it ends up that the Bal HaMois gets 2/3 of the hefsid, and the Mesasik gets 1/3 of the hefsid. And lepel, what happened is v'nevad hamomen. All the money is lost. He gave him $1,000 to be Mesasik. Lepel, all those $1,000 were lost. So the question is, so l'chura there was $1,000 loss. Now we learned before that when there's a loss, so 2/3 of the loss goes to the Bal HaMois, and 1/3 of the loss goes to the Mesasik. Is yesh mishahira sheishalim ha-Mesasik shlish. So in other words, the Mesasik is only responsible for 1/3 of the loss, so he has to reimburse the Bal HaMois with 1/3 of the money. Just like if not all the money was lost, part of the money was lost, so he takes 1/3 of the loss, and the Bal HaMomen takes 2/3 of the loss. So even if all the money was lost, also he'll only take 1/3 of the loss, and the Bal HaMomen is going to take 2/3 of the loss. But V'yiroli, the Rambam says that not like Misher Shehera, nor Shehu Mishalim Machzim, that he has to pay half. Shehu B'Teres Milva, that he has to pay B'Teres Milva, because since originally it was a mechza milva and a mechza pikodin. So the mechza milva, he can never get out of the mechza milva. The mechza milva, for sure, he has to pay. That he only gets a third of the loss. We learned that the Chacham say that he only takes a third of the loss, and 2/3 of the loss goes to the Balamomen. That's only b'shalei higia hefsid little Balamois pachas mechatzim ameni. If at the end the Balamomen is not going to get less than half of his money, so then we say a loss, which lepel the Mesasig is going to only pay a third of the loss, and the Balamomen is going to get 2/3 of the loss. But Sof Kol Sof, the Balamomen will get back half of the money he originally invested, so then we can make these calculations of a third and 2/3. But if as a result of making a third and 2/3, so it'll come out that the Balamois is not even going to get half of his original money, which is the milva, so then you can't make such calculations, because Lepil, he gave him a milva, and the halva has to be paid up. Kesat. Reuven shenosan l'shimon me'av esrim dinner. He gave him 120 dinner. And v'nosan upichash tishim. And Lepel, 90 dinner of these 120 were left. So Memela, there's a loss of 90. Is Arishim and Mishalim Shleshim, so he only gets a third of the loss. The Mesasig only takes a third of the loss. And Lepel, v'nimtze Reuven, netl shishim. So Reuven Lepel is ending up with 60. And so half of the money he got back. So Lepel, he took took a third of the loss. He took only a third of the loss. The Mesasig only took a third of the loss. But ultimately, the Balamomen got back half of his original investment. If Lepel Shimon lost not 90 out of the 120, but 105, so L'chur, according to the Cheshbon, we say that he only loses 35. He only loses a third. Is a name Yafsid Shimon Chamishu Shleishim. We don't say that Shimon should only lose 35, which means a third of the loss. Sheimat Eimer Ken, if you're going to say that, is Nimtzer Reuven Eitel Chamishim. So it's going to come out that there's 15 left, and there was 105 lost, and now the Mesasik is compensating a third of the loss, so he's adding 35 to the 15. So what's Reuven getting? Reuven, which is the investor, is only getting back 50. There can't be a mitzvah that Reuven should take less than a half, because since he originally gave the money as a chotzi milva chotzi pikadon, he has to be compensated the chotzi milva lefichoch, and that's therefore the din. As a result of this din, shtar esek hayetzel yisemim. If you have an esek, this type of a shtar which means that you gave money to someone betur iskla, which is chotzi milva and chotzi pikadon. And Lepel, the person that had the Asik, died. Now the Shtar Asik Hayetzal Yisem, Shahoya Aviyah Mesasik, the father was the Mesasik. So the din is Nishba Balashtar, we gave a Mechza. The Balashtar is Nishba, and he takes half of the Yisemim. Why? Why does he take half? Shubatetis Milva. Benegeh, the Iska, he could tie in Nansu. Maybe Nansu. Masha'inkim Benegeh, the Milva Nansu doesn't help. Therefore, he has to pay half. The Yisayim have to pay half. If the father could have tainted something, so maybe there was a loss of everything. So he doesn't owe half; he only owes a third. Why don't we tainted for the Yarshim that maybe all the money was lost, and Mela, the father, was only responsible for a third of the money, not half of the money? The answer is no. He didn't. The Baal HaMois never takes less than half. That's this din. So Mela, the Rambam is adding over here that even though we learned before that when there was an iska, there was no deal, there was no, they didn't make up anything, or they made up, there should be half and half, which is not really an upmach. So the din is then that the Baal HaMois takes 2/3 of the loss, and the Misasik takes a third of the loss. But Bamedvar Mamurim, that he only takes a third of the loss, if it's going to end up that the Baal HaMois is lefach is going to get half of his money back. But if as a result of the fact that he's only going to take a third of the loss, the Baal HaMois is not going to get half of his money back, so then he has to pay half. He's not getting anything for Lepel. Lepel, you're saying that he has to pay all the money that he lost. Marshall, there was he gave him $1,000 and all the money was lost. So Lepel, he has to pay the $500. So the he's not getting anything for what he did. His ask was bibigod. The answer is Shariyavid kol hachetzer shel bekodin. If the bekodin was there and he was misasik with the bekodin, so now you're saying he deserves something for the chetzer shel bekodin. But over here, the whole bekodin is gone. V'leinisha kan bekodin klal sheneimer im leyitel schari yira kiribis. In other words, if he's giving back a bekodin, and now the question is not getting paid for the fact that he was misasik with bekodin, so then you could say he has to get compensated for dealing with the bekodin. Over here, shari chotzi amil bilvad netel. The Baal HaMois is not getting his Pekodin back at all. If he's getting back his Pekodin and maybe getting some extra, so now the question is, how is the person that's the Misasik being compensated for he was Misasik in the Pekodin? But over here, the Baal Pekodin is not getting anything back. He's only getting back half. So since he's only getting back half, so therefore there's no need to compensate him for doing anything with the Pekodin, and therefore he has to pay back half. As the Nekudas Advarim is that if all the money is lost, he has to give him back half. He has to give him back half of the money that he took originally. If not all the money was lost, but it was lost enough money that if he's only going to give back a third of the loss, there's not going to be half of the money paid back. So then he has to give him back the extra money as well. So the in the case of that he gave him 120 and Lepel 105 was lost. So Lepel, it's not enough that he should give back 35. He's going to have to give back 45. He'll give back 45. So Mel, he'll end up having 60. He'll end up having 60. That's the din. Sharei v'leinisha kan Pekodin klal sheneimer im leyitel schari yira kiribis. Sharei chotzi milva bilvad netel. He's only taking the half of the Im hisnu sheitla misasik revia schar. The deal was that a revia of the schar should belong to the misasik, which basically means that he's lending him a revia of the money. He's giving him, let's say, $1,000, and the deal is that a quarter of the schar is going to belong to the misasik, which basically means that $250 is a loan. And lepel va'avid amom kula, he lost all $1,000. So that is mishalim revia kula. He has to pay the $250. Shu b'teres milva, which is a teres milva. That's talking about if all the money was lost. Avalim nishar min hamom mat. If lepel some of the money was remained. Kidei shem toisev al eisei ha'ma'at. Shtus ha'hefset shepichasei. And it's going to come out that if he's going to add to that money that was left, a sixth of the entire loss. Now, the cheshbon of a sixth is, like we said before, be'emes l'chure, since a quarter of the money was a loan, so l'chure, he has a quarter of the loss. A quarter of the loss is his. But in order to compensate the misasik, so we're taking away a third of what he's supposed to lose. So the third of a quarter makes it into a sixth. So in other words, when you take away a third of a quarter, so then there's a six, like we spoke before. A quarter is 3/12. When you take away a third of the quarter, so it means you take away 1/12. So memela you're left with 2/12, which is a sixth. So memela sa'avalim nishar nachabal nishar menamam ma'at kedei shem teisav al eisei ma'at shtus. If you're going to add the shtus, which is what he has to pay after we say that the Baal HaMomen compensates him and takes away a third of his loss, so he ends up paying only a sixth of the loss. Rather than paying a quarter of the loss, he's paying a sixth of the loss. But if you'll add to that money that was left over, the shtus which he has to pay according to the deal that we spoke about in Halacha in Perek Vav, it'll come out Yavi Akil Revi HaMomen Yeser. Sof Kol Sof, the Baal HaMomen is going to end up with a quarter of the money. So then it's Arezah Mishalem Shtus Bulvad Minatam Kirshek Kvar Biyarnu. So in other words, the yisod is that the first thing L'chei Reish, the Baal HaMomen has to get back his alva. That's the din. He has to get back his alva. What's Taich's alva? The money that he was being mistaker from it, that was the money that he lent him. So Mele, if the deal was that he's going to get a quarter of the schar, so it means he lent him a quarter of the money. If the deal was that he's going to get half of the schar, so it means he lent him half of the money. So he lent him half of the money. So that's the original deal. So Mele, that halva has to be repaid. And for that, there's no dinim of that the Baal HaMois has to take away from that payment. However, if Lepel, there is going to end up, there's some of the money. So if all the money was lost, he has to pay all the whole halva. If the halva was a quarter, he has to pay the whole quarter. If the halva was a half, he has to pay the whole half. Masha'enkin, if some of the money was left, And if according to the cheshbon that we made before, that he's only mishtativ in the hefsid, he's only mishtativ 2/3 of his hefsid, and 1/3 of the hefsid, the balamois takes it. So Mele comes out that 2/3 of the hefsid goes to the balamois, and 1/3 of the hefsid goes to the misasik. So b'chiyai gavna, if Lepeli is going to give that money plus the money that's left, is going to end up being that all the money of the halva was returned to the balamois. So that's besed. That's what we learned in Pedig Vav. Knows the Rambam is limiting the din of Pedig Vav. The din of Pedig Vav was that Lepel, the misasik, only loses 1/3 of the hefsid, and the balamois loses 2/3 of the hefsid. And now the Rambam is saying in this din, Bamed Dvarim Amurim, if the balamois is l'chol hapach, he's going to get back his full alva. Mashenken, if he's not going to get back his full alva, so then this din doesn't apply. Halacha beis, ha-misasik shehifsid, and then the chazer v'torach acher viach. We're talking about in a tzir, where the deal is, it says, Chazal instituted this deal, that if there'll be a revach, so 2/3 of the revach is going to go to the misasik, and if there's a hefsid, so 2/3 of the hefsid goes to the Bal HaMois. So Lepel originally, when he started the Asik, the first month, there was a hefsid, he was mafsid. And then as it continued, he went ahead and he had a revach. He worked hard, and he had a revach. So the question is, are you going to evaluate the hefsid separately and the revach separately? So both ways, the misasik is going to win. In other words, if you misasik the hefsid separately, so 2/3 of the hefsid goes to the Bal HaMois, and then when you're going to evaluate the revach separately, so 2/3 of the revach is going to go to the misasik. And the Mamela will come out, the misasik is going to gain on both sides. So that's what I'm saying. It's not like that. We don't evaluate the revach separately and the hefsid separately. We look at the bottom line at the end. We take a look and we say, Lepel at the end, how much revach was there, or how much hefsid was there all the way at the end? And Mamela, so you combine the revach and the hefsid. In other words, if at first Moshe there was a revach, a hefsid of 100, and now Lepel there was a revach of 150. So Memela, so it comes out at the end, there was a revach of 50. It's not we say there was a hefsid of 100, and then there was a revach of 150. At the end, there was a revach of 50, and al derez a fakert. If there was a revach of 100 and a hefsid of 150, so we say at the end, there was a hefsid of 50. That's this din. Halacha beis. Hamasasik shehifsid, and then the chazav v'torach acher viach is ain't yochel leimar lebal hamois. The misasik can't say to the bal hamois, boy v'nakshav a hefsid shefsadu tchila. Let's make a cheshbon of what happened last month, that there was a hefsid, and memela tafsid shnei shlishim. And then v'nakshiv harevach shervachtu b'achreina, and now we'll make a new cheshbon about the revach shervachtu b'achreina, and then v'titl shlish, and you only get 1/3 of the revach. El mechashiv b'achreina b'lvad, you only make one cheshbon. Al harevach el hefsid, and knows what's the bottom line. If the bottom line was a revach, or the bottom line was a hefsid. And Memela ve'ein le'ela b'revach she'esav ala keren. So he only gets the revach. And as we go back to how much the keren was, and we take a look and we see, is there more than the keren? So that's called the revach. We don't look at that. Maybe there was a tkufa that there was much less than the keren, and Memela we calculated that already. And now we're going to look at kilo this revach. I'm being on the calculation after we already calculated the hefsid. We don't say that. We say what was the original keren when he first started the asik, and how much money is there now. And that's how we calculate whether there was a revach and there was a hefsid. And either way, if there was a revach, so the misasi gets 2/3 of the revach. And if there was a hefsid, so the hefsid goes 2/3 of the hefsid is to the balamois. Halacha gimel. Noslei masayim yiriyas masayim dinim. He gave him 200 yiriyas, which is the value of 200 dinim basic as a business. The balamois, the balamois, he's the one that gives to the misasik, this Masayim Yiriyas, Masayim Din, basic, and Lepel, because of shtei stars, he wrote 2 stars. Instead of giving it 1 star, he wrote 2 stars, Mea b'chol star. So then is Mechashev le al kol star b'fnei. So since he Lepel wrote it in 2 stars, even though he gave it the basachas, but he wrote it in 2 stars, he reckons each star separately, and therefore a balamois who shifts it al atzmi. It always comes out worse for the balamois, because Lepel, the balamois comes out in a shvacher position. Say if there was a loss, and say if there was a gain. But if the loss and the gain are connected, so you can say there was no loss and no gain, or there was a very little loss, or a little gain. So in other words, if you connect the two, so then it's advantageous, it's better for the Balamois. If you separate the two, so then it's better for the Misasik, as was the Pashta. So in other words, if you have them separate, so let's say in one of them there was a loss, and one of them there was a gain. So we say in the loss, so 2/3 of the loss goes to the Balamois, and in the gain, 2/3 of the gain goes to the Misasik. If they would have been combined, so then we would have said there's the loss and the gain would cancel out each other, and there would be only either a minimal loss or a minimal gain. But mainly, once the loss and the gain cancel out each other, so there's no 2/3 and 1/3. That's Pashut. So that's why we say that the Baal HaMois, who sheifs the Alatzmi, by the fact that he could have really written one star, which would have been normal, and Lepel he wrote 2 stars, so Mamela he always ends up losing. Now Nasan le Meya Yiriyas b'Meya Dinim. If he gave him, obviously if there was a gain on both of them, both stars, so this makes no difference. If they gained on this star and on this star, so it would have been the same. But if you gain on one and you lose on the other, so Mamela, this loss would have been outweighed by the gain. In other words, they would have canceled out with the gain. So now that they're separate, again, like we said before, now that they're separate, so there's 2/3, 2/3. Masha'inkin, if they would have been together, so then they would have canceled out each other. Now, that's the din. Bamis, he gave him 200, and Bamis l'chura, the seichel would have been to write 1 star, and he wrote 2 stars. The same thing for Kert. Nosli Meya Yiriyas b'Meya Dinim. Originally, he gave him 100 Yiriyas for 100 Dinim. And then later on, the Chazer v'Nosli Be'isik Acher, Nocha Geschäft, he gave him Meya Chavish Shel Yain, again b'Meya Dinim, another Geschäft. And Lepeil, so the Misasi could have really insisted, I want 2 stars, it's 2 separate Geschäft. Now, but Lepeil, Kosevli star Esik b'Masayim Dinim. The Bala Mois, rather than writing 2 separate stories, wrote 1 star. And that star included side the Meya Yiriyas and side the Meya Chavish. So Mamela is Eini Mechashiv le'ela b'shtar echad. So then the cheshbon is only in 1 star echad, and therefore, and who sheifs the dalasmi? Who sheifs the dalasmi is now the misasik was the one that lost because the pale he put it into 1 star. So the Ram gives the tzir where it comes out to be better. Sheimachar hameya yiriyas b'meya u'shleishim. L'mashal he sold the meya yiriyas for 130, and lepel b'meya chavis b'shivim. And the Meya Chavis he sold for 70. So Ba'amis he lost, he gained 30 on one deal, and he lost 30 on the other deal. So the din is Noitelakel, because since it's 1 star, and Lepel, so Mamela basically there was no loss. So basically what happened over here is the Bala Mois gave him 100 of Yiriyas, he gave him 100 of Chavias, and they were both in 1 star. The Yiriyas he sold for 130. The Chavias he sold for 70. So basically he gave him 200. Now he has 200 back. So those 200 back he has to give back to the Balamois. Because 100 of it is Pikad and 100 of it is Halva. Hariakel Masayim B'leir V'yaklum. There was no Revach and there was no loss. Mele, everything goes back to the Balamois. Aval ilu inicham shnei yasakim kshayu. However, if he would have left it to be 2 separate geschäften, in other words, there would have been 1 star for the 100 Yiriyas and another star for the 100 wine of chavis wine, is hayamarviach hamsasik bechelki bebgodim esrim. So he would have ended up saying like this: I sold this. I had 2 geschäften with you. 1 geschäft was begodim the Yiriyas, and over there I gained 20. And I had another geschäft with you, which was wine. Umafsid bechevik becholke, and over there we lost 30. So I take 10 of the loss. So over here I get 20 of the gain, and over here I take 10 of the loss. I end up bringing with 10. So the misasik. So it's always letevis hamisasik that it should be 2 separate geschäften, because lepel through that he gains on both sides. If there's a loss, he gains because he gains in the sense that he only takes 1/3 of the loss rather than half of the loss, and if there's a gain, he takes 2/3 of the gain. Mashenk, and if they're together, so then the loss and the gains will cancel each other out. Like in this case over here, he made 130 on the Yiriyas, he made 70 on the Chavias. So Memele, if it's one geschäft, so basically he didn't make anything. What he gained was cancelled out by the loss, and there was no gain, there was no loss. Memele has to give back all the money. Mashenkin, if it's two shtaris, so then in the gain he gets 20% of the gain, which is 20, and in the loss he only carries 1/3 of the loss, so that's 10. Memele comes out that he ends up having 10. Halacha dalet. Eina mesasik yochel lachlik hamoy shel esik l'schera v'leimar etles hachetzi shebeteres mil v'la'atzmi ve'eser ve'etin b'y v'aniach hachetzi shebeteres b'kodin bebezen, and the other part I'll give it to put in bezen. In other words, the Baal HaMois gave the mesasik money to make business with it. The deal was that he should make business with all the money. Now be'emes we said that it's chotzi milva chotzi b'kodin. So the mesasik says to himself like this: Chotzi, the chmilva, that milva I'll take. He's giving me also the chotzi b'kodin. That chotzi b'kodin, the kilo, I'll return it to him. How am I going to return it to him? I mean, obviously he's not going to want to take it back. He's not. So he's going to give it to Bezdin. He's going to give it to Bezdin to say to Bezdin, Bezdin, you hold that chotzi b'kodin, and I'm only dealing with the chotzi milva. So he's saying no. Because he never gave him a halva to use the halva separately. The whole gather of this halva was an iska. In other words, he gave him money to do business with. And the havana of this money is that it's chotzi milva and chotzi b'kodin. But there's no chotzi milva if there's no chotzi b'kodin. The whole milva is only if it's together with a chotzi b'kodin. And the mcholek v'asa zafilu b'bezin agodl lei osa klum. Because if he's going to start saying, I'm using only half of the money, fine, but half of that money is not milva. Half of that money is chotzi milva, chotzi b'kodin. El aschari hefsed b'neim, aleis na'adochish b'yarn. In other words, it's not divisible. You can't go ahead and divide it. This mesasi can't divide it and say, I'm taking the milva. Because the milva and the b'kodin are inseparable. In other words, he didn't give him a milva plus a b'kodin. He gave him money, which is a milva and a b'kodin. And we say that it's a half a milva and half a b'kodin. But it's a half a milva and half a b'kodin. Every nekuda is a half a milva and half a b'kodin. But he can go ahead and decide that he's taking only half of it, and that half is going to be the milva. Halacha hey. Now, a person that's a mesasik, he has a right to go ahead and do business with the money or the items that was given to him to be mesasik. He doesn't have a right to give it away. If he goes ahead and gives away presents to other people from the metaltal or mimois esik, and the heavy balamois raya brura, he has a raya brura that this metaltal was given away from the asik money, was given away by the misasik without rishus, is mitzin esim. The recipient has to give it back. He had no right to take it. Because he had no right to give it, he had no right to take it. Vafilu shina mekabel esam. The one that received this present went ahead and was mishana this item, or a mochram v'nosen matana lacherim ahifsid, he's chayiv l'shalom, because he knows since he received money from an asik which he had no right to receive. So if he goes ahead and sells it or is mishana it and causes that it should no longer belong to the original owner, so he's a person that was a mazik. He's a mazik or a ganef. I'll call upon him, he has to return that money back to the original owner. Chayiv l'shalom. And v'hakil b'raya brura, everything has to be it. V'raya brura has to be a raya brura that the money from the original asik was given to this person, and that this person went ahead and he gave it away, or he broke it, or he sold it. And that person can no longer take it. So the recipient of this matana is responsible towards the Baal HaMois, the recipient. It's brought down. It depends if that person is aware that this money is really money of the asik. Because if he's aware that the money is of the asik, so then he's responsible for the fact that he was mazikit. But lepel, if he's unaware, Lamashal is brought down. The Ramara brings from the Chavez Das, Lamashal, the second, we're having a case where the Misasi gave it as a matana, and that person gave it a matana to someone else. So that person that received the matana to someone else, you could go ahead and take it back from him if you could prove that that item was really yours. Because there was never a kinyan on it. There was never a real kinyan on it. It's your item. But on the other hand, if that person was mazikit without being aware that it originally comes from the asik, so you can't go ahead and mon any money from him. You can only mon money from a mazik if that person, and the person bought an item and then he was mazikit. That's only if he knows that that item he had no right to take. Kvar biarnu shamisasik shemes, and when Misasik dies, so now the question is, the Bal HaMois wants to get his money back, is Nishba Bal HaMois v'gave a mechza, because half of it was a milva. So in Mela we learned before that he's gave a mechza because he's certainly entitled to his chotzi milva. In other words, if there's actually metaltalin and there's Adam testifying that this metaltalin over here is metaltalin which is connected, which is from that asik, in other words, that's the metaltalin of the asik, so then netleis and balamois, it doesn't need a shvur. In other words, if he's taking money from the Yisemim, so he's taking money for the milva. So when you're going ahead and taking money from the Yisemim, so over here he's not taking anything from the Yisemim. There's Adam saying that these items are items that belong to their father. It belongs to him, I'm sorry, not to their father, it belongs to him. So even though it's lying right now in the possession of the Yisemim, but Lepel, they were never the Yisemim, they never belonged to the father as well. Is Nathan Nesim Balamois B'Leishvur? Ve'ein Bal Chev V'Leisha Natel Mehem Klum. And this money, that was money of the Asik, so nobody has a right to take from it. In other words, let's say the Misasik had a wife, and the Misasik died, so now she wants the money of Ksuba, or there was a Bal Chev. So the wife and the Bal Chev don't have a right to take from the money of the Asik. The money of the Asik doesn't belong to the Misasik. The money of the Asik belonged to the Bal HaMois. The Misasik was being Misasik in this money. But if you could prove that this money was the money of the Asik, or this metalton was metalton of this Asik, so first of all, the original Bal HaMois could go ahead and take it back without a shvur, and the wife of the Misasik, and Aldera, his Bal Chev, can go ahead and mon the money. Elim kein hoyebem revach. If it was revach of this Asik, so then hari chelik harevach shomes shel yarshav. So that chelik harevach, in other words, if there was a certain gain, so in other words, the Misasik did business with this money, and Lepel, there's more to this Asik than was originally the Karen. There's also a revach. So that revach, the Misasik is entitled to his chelik of the revach. So Melach chelik harevach shel mes shel yarshav, that belongs to his yarshav. And then the Yitul Beisi HaChelik, Bal Chev, Isha. So then in that Revach, the Bal Chev and the Isha are entitled to take it. Now Lepel, even though Bepashtas this Revach is metaltalin, so Mefarshim explained that it's talking about L'achar Takonis HaGeinim, that the Isha and the Bal Chev gave him a metaltalin. So Memele, they come up with metaltalin. Bekitzer, when a Misasik is Misasik in money, that money belongs to the Bal HaMois. It doesn't belong to the Misasik. And therefore, if you could prove that this money is the money of the Asik, so the Bal HaMois could go ahead and take it from the Yisem without a shvur. And the Misasik's Isha Bal Chev can mon from this money of the Asik because it's not his money. If there was a Revach there, so then there's a certain percentage of that Revach that belongs to the Misasik. So that money is the Yarshim are entitled to, and the Isha and the Bal Chev could go ahead and mon from that money. Halacha Vav. Hanesen Mois Lechaveri Liker Ben Peiris L'Machtischar. He made the deal that should go buy Peiris L'Machtischar, and Lepel V'lei Laker, the person didn't go ahead and buy. Is Ein Olav El Tarumas, so he could only have tinus to him. In other words, he gave him money to go do business with it. Lepel, he didn't do business. But if there's a clear raya that he did do business, he went ahead and used this money to buy things and sell, so then is Haretzi B'manu Haschar Bal Karchi, then he could take out whatever he earns from that money, Bal Karchi. It's Pashas. In other words, he gave him money, and that person didn't do anything, so Pashas, so you have Tarumas, he didn't do anything. But on the other hand, even though he could have made business, but Lepel, he didn't make business. So Memele, you have only tinus to him. Lepel, if there's Eidas that he did do business, so then that whatever he earned from that business, according to the deal, so that he has to get that so he's entitled to it. Memele, he takes it from Bal Karchi. Now, Nosli Mois Likar Ben Peiris L'Machtischar, he made up a deal by Peiris L'Machtischar, and as we'll divide the profits. So the din is Leker Ben Mikol Min Sheyirtze. I didn't tell him which Peiris to buy. He could buy any type of Peiris. However, if he says Peiris, it means Peiris. V'liyikach like Sus, v'liyetzim v'chem kol yetzim b'zeh, because that's not Peiris. Halach weiter. Hameshev is Chaveri B'chanus L'Machtischar. A person puts someone in a chanus. A person opens a store, and he has items there, and he says, "You go ahead and sell these items. You'll sit in this chanus and sell these items for me, and we'll divide the profit. You'll have half of the profit. I'll have half of the profit. So if this person that you put into the store to go ahead and sell the items for the Bala Chanus was an uman, is liyasig b'umnase. He shouldn't be oisig in his umnus while he's sitting in the chanus. Because while he's involved in his umnus, if let's say he's a tailor and he's going to start doing his work in sewing clothes, he won't be able to deal with the chanus properly. And if the shutev was together with him in the chotzer, and Memela, that person also was involved in the chanus. In other words, he wasn't the only person that was involved in the chanus. The other person was also involved, and he was able to see what he's doing. So then it's mutter. Then he's allowed to be involved in his own umnus as well. In other words, since it's not so necessary for him to be so watchful on what's going on in the chanus, because the shutev was also imei b'chotzer. Now this person was put into the chanus to sell the items of the chanus which belongs to the Bala Chanus. Now this person is sitting in the chanus, he bought some other items. He bought some other items and he's selling his own items. In other words, besides the fact that he's sitting in the chanus and selling items that belongs to the Bala Chanus, he's also made himself like another little table in the chanus, and that's where he's selling his own items. So the din is he shouldn't be doing that, because Lepel, the deal was that he's going to be in the chanus and be selling the items of the chanus, not selling his own items. And Lepel, if he went ahead and bought his own items and sold, is aschar le'emtza, because that's part of the deal. The deal is that whatever he's going to sell in the chanus is going to be considered machzal machzah. So again, we had the shaila before, that l'chura eino de makta davish le'bolayim. In other words, Lepel, how is the kinyan that he knows that he was mechayiv himself that anything that he's going to sell of these items that belong to the Bala Chanus is going to be 50-50. Lepel, he's selling his own items, so he really had no right to do it. And let's say he was mechayiv himself that the things that he's going to sell is also going to be 50-50. But l'chura, how could a person be mechayiv himself? If a person goes ahead and sells his items, and it's his money and it's his items, the mice says he's sitting in the other person's chanus. But that's this din. That's what we had this din before again. Also, that the din is that if a person went into a store, he's in the store, someone owns the store, and he put someone in the store to go ahead and sell for him. And he made the deal with him that person is to get a certain percentage of the sale, 50-50 lemzal. And Lepel, this person opened himself his own table and he bought items for himself and he's selling it. So the din is that he also gives 50% of the profit of his own table, he has to also give to the Bala Chanus. That's what it says here.